All right. Well, first of all, welcome back, Wakenda. We missed you last week. I
Hi,
did talk to
thank
myself.
you.
Yeah.
Are we on a, just FYI, are we on a split screen here? Or am I on a little, for some reason I don't see a split screen.
You look split on mine, but if you go up
Oh,
and
I do. Maybe it's my view.
you might
Ooh,
have it.
duh,
Yeah.
duh,
But
duh.
hopefully, because it's recording, it'll be split.
That's right.
Technology, I don't know. You know what? We're gonna post it
I
and
did go blonder a little while ago, so
well, it's not, I mean, it's you'll be fine. You had brain cells to spare.
Anywho, hello, hi.
Hello. Okay. You said something like this epiphany that you had around your no. Because our question this week was, what are you saying no to so you can say a bigger yes to yourself, which is coming off of our own apparent learnings of the week and energy. I feel like when we're both in it, that means we're not probably alone. It seems to be like a human theme of the week.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I always get reminded by that from that by one of my first coaches was like, whatever you're going through is likely what your clients are experiencing. So make sure that you're talking to that. And I'm like, damn it.
I'm supposed to have healed everything. I'm good.
Right? No. I just am here to support you. Nope, actually it's always whatever we're doing with you guys is what we are fully embodying doing here
Real
with
time.
you at the same time. Real time.
Yeah, completely. Well, you said you had a story that pertained to this. Is that a good place to start?
Sure, yeah, we can start there. Yeah, and we were just talking about yeah, making room for your yeses and where do those nos come in and obviously we find ourselves challenged with that and we find so many of the people that we work with challenged with that, which leads to unclarity and when you're attracting unclear things in your life and attracting situations that are less than desirable because you're really not saying yes to yourself. So I can give a small, but I think to me it's a big example of a situation that I'm working through with family right now, as we have a lot of family in town, and it was around just me kind of inherently always feeling that um, I can be accommodating for everyone. And then I realize what happens is therefore I move into self-abandonment. And so I had to get really clear on first like finding out what my yes is and then communicating that so that everyone knew where to bounce. And it was easy peasy. But my old habit and patterning was to go into this really questioning of myself of why did I need to give myself permission for what I needed and criticizing myself for that and feeling like guilty or like, oh well, yeah, but you really do have the time. I mean, what do you like, you're just doing work from home on your computer and really recognizing the ease in the past of self-abandoning myself for someone else's um yes, essentially. But then in the end, actually, it's not helping any of us because not only am I resentful and suffering, but now on some level, I will spew that out. Like that will be felt, right?
Oh,
So it's not acting in loving kindness to myself or someone else by not understanding what my no is so that I can have more of what my yes is. So I was able to process that with myself. And be able to recognize what was happening and what was being offered as the gift so that I could go, oh, well, why don't we just figure out what it is that you need, Wakanda, and then share a schedule of where you can say yes. Like what we've talked about in the past of like, it's important not to just know your no, but to know where you can say yes so it can feel helpful, but you're not in self-abandonment or self-betrayal and you're putting your needs first.
beautiful. Love it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and I was sharing with Wakenda that I realize, this is still something I'm healing from as well. First of all, the abandonment wound for sure, abandonment and rejection, both and. I don't know,
Hmm.
one or the other, but really like this understanding that I used to think that because I was told I was too needy at certain points in my life, that meant I was not allowed to then have needs. So now, even still, even though I teach people how to set boundaries and refuse to not set them for myself, I still get to feel these like little anxious moments of, oh my God, I could possibly be completely abandoned and rejected for speaking my needs. But
Hmm.
the awareness is always immediately followed by, but I can't be abandoned if I'm not abandoning myself, even if the person I'm requesting from cannot meet those needs for me. I met it for myself and asking, and it's information. I actually this is a dating example, which is great since this is the group, but I was working with a client last night who is dating and realized that at this point they've kind of hit this ceiling where they're not really talking about much, like not moving forward. And it came from this. It came from almost like a fear of like finding out something that you don't want to know or realizing it's not aligned. And a lot of our discussion was actually around like just how much time we waste in avoidance like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. By not being true to yourself, what part are you continuing to self-abandon then? And we all know the consequences of that and the final outcome.
It sucks.
Yeah. There is no happy ending in our self-abandonment process.
No, no, we get abandoned and we've abandoned ourselves. And so then we have all this forgiveness work to do on both sides, as well as all the grief.
Exactly.
So it's just
Exactly.
better to figure it out sooner than later,
Yes. So much easier just to figure out what your no is.
right?
So
And your
you can say
yeses.
yes to something else.
Yeah.
Well, I have a funny example of a client who almost went into a mode of self-abandonment um, a couple of days ago, and it shared this funny story with me, which just made me laugh, is that and then I think the universe like worked out for him for it not to happen. But he was like, man, there was like this woman. I was at the car wash and she was like talking to just chatting me up. I could tell she was really into me. And he's like, and for some reason, my stupid self didn't ask her out like in that moment. And first first thoughts is like, okay, like we don't use that word. You've worked with me long enough now. We don't use our
Right.
stupid self.
Yeah.
And B, we trust that all things are in divine and right timing, right? So if the right person is supposed to be with you, that will happen. If you didn't make that statement, there was something that held you back. Well, I thought it was funny because later he goes, well, I wasn't attracted to her. And I was like,
So why was it your
so So clearly, something in you knew what your no was as to why
right?
you couldn't say yes. But there was a part that had to discount that because it went into the earlier wound of like, yeah, but it might have been my only opportunity, right? So I may have needed to abandon what I really want in life in order to have opportunity.
Right? Well, and I'm just thinking most of the time in those situations, we prove ourselves right because that totally reminds me of a story of a friend who I remember years ago being out with her and her showing me this guy and her being like, yeah, that guy is just so weird to me. Like, he's just off-putting. Well, ended up dating him a while ago and like ended up being exactly what she knew all along. You know what I mean? It was like half the time it's like, why do we have to validate ourselves for the thing that we
Right.
already freaking
Totally.
know? But you know what I think it is? Like something about your story reminded me of this, and it's such a easy thing, but like if it's not a yes, it's a no.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it's not a no, it's a yes. But so oftentimes we're like looking for this like clarity and
Yeah.
questioning like this very simple thing, like I actually had no chemistry with that person and I was not attracted, or something about their energy just makes me want to puke. Like, then why do we even
Right.
continue?
Yeah, and in that case, the lack mindset comes up, right? Oh, I might only have this one opportunity and I may have missed it, regardless of the fact that, I think in that case, it was like someone choosing me, right? I was getting chosen, so I need to go for that versus actually having some discernment about what I'm interested in.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I think so often we are like used to begging for love or received that conditioning around being chosen that we actually do forget that we have choice in the matter.
right.
I can relate with that. I've done that.
Yeah. And that it's finite and it's, that there's a limited number of opportunities. And so you better take your opportunity that presents itself.
Right? I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel as I've gotten older, I'm like, I do not want to waste my time.
Oh yeah. Hey, yeah, no, definitely. And I hope all of you in this group, this is why we're sharing this story, is that so that you are clear. I mean, the reason why I bring this story up is because you are clear on what you're saying no to and yes to, because in that scenario, maybe he would have asked her out and then, got himself into a situation of like, wait, I wasn't into this person, and then finding themselves entangled and not being able to like now say no. So, and this client happens to be very similar if someone has a hard time saying no. So,
Right? Which is then the lesson.
yes, yes, yes. So I'm guessing that there might be a few of you or a lot of you people pleasers in this group on some hand or some level, and those of you who have a hard time saying no. And I actually was thinking about this as well, that I find this really comes up with both like an anxious and avoidant attachment style, is that it's both parties, it comes out differently, but I find that both parties typically actually truly are people pleasers, and they're just approaching the boundary issue from different perspectives, right? But they're both afraid on some level of like either, not getting needs met, or afraid to lose themselves, right? Lose their like they don't have boundaries. So I will just avoid the situation and not tell, not say yes or no in order to avoid that.
Totally. Yeah. And on the more anxious side, I mean, that's like not wanting to have to feel the discomfort of setting the boundary or feeling the other person's disappointment. Or I was sharing a story
Yep.
with you earlier where I just recently set a new boundary and then like watched myself kind of spin in this little bit of anxiousness. Like, what if I get rejected now? And it's like, but I didn't reject me actually, which is something
Yes.
that in the past, like, yeah, I would avoid having probably even more as like an empath. I don't want to feel people's shit. And I know that people pleasers are doing the same thing, which my like the most mind-blowing thing I ever heard about people pleasing is it's a form of control. I think like
Yeah.
forget that it really
Hmm.
is like if you are withholding information, it is to your benefit in some way. You are managing someone else's experience, which is
Exactly.
not being fully who you are. It's not being fully authentic.
Right. Totally. Thus, not really being fully in love, in the state of love with self and other, especially when we know that those frequencies will come out sideways eventually.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've been speaking to a lot in the last year is that when like someone else has like leaky boundaries too, when I think it's hard enough, first of all, to think about our own boundaries, but then as you do this work, you start to like recognize that other people's either leaky or lack of boundaries tends to slide downhill. Like it's
Hmm.
actually not just self-loving to set those, but it's like loving of other people you care about because someone's going to catch the shit down the line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yep. That was the clear message, is that, whatever boundaries we set, whatever no we set for ourselves is truly an act of love for everyone involved. Everyone has a sense of peace because, and I've seen this growing up, particularly with a mother who is like also the martyr type, and, the can't say no, the people pleaser, and ends up, spewing out everywhere, and then no one actually wants to be around, and there's like a curiosity as to why that is the case, right? She's like, I don't understand. It's like, no, actually everyone actually wants you to actually know what your no is and
Yeah.
what your yes is, but none of us can set that for you.
Right. Right. It sounds like she's the kind of person that would then be like, well, what do you think my yes should be?
Yeah,
People say no
totally.
to-
Well, or she'll have a reason, an excuse as to why it's not possible, you know. So
Oh, fun. Yeah, I can relate with all of
you're
that.
like, okay, well, so let's see how that, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to not work with family.
Oh my God, no, I'm not even interested. Yeah. I mean, it just, it reminds me of, I can't remember if I said this before after we hit record, but like that your needs and desires are just as important as anybody else's,
Hmm.
which is something that a coach said to me like when I was just getting divorced, and it blew my mind because I think so many of us have been told it's like wrong to have needs or to have desires. I know a lot of the women in particular I've worked with, like they like refuse to even like some don't even know what it is that they desire. Or
Hmm.
if they do, there's this way that we like put it off until the kids are grown, until retirement, until I lose the weight, like whatever it is, instead of like, I mean, really, we can only live our life in this exact moment.
Hmm.
And like one of the funnest things to do is to like figure out what those tiny things are. Like the big ones,
Hmm.
yeah, eventually, right? But you stretch your capacity to hold and receive your desire by actually, if you're like me, oh, I desire another cup of coffee. I desire a piece of chocolate, and like fulfilling the little ones. Like I think that's what you're saying. I love like you're like, know your yeses. I'm like, ooh, you know what? I probably still have
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I realized today is that I was so stuck in like trying to push away something because I was afraid and all the feelings that were coming up. And then it was like, well, wait a minute. You also have an area where you could say yes that wasn't in the field of resentment, wasn't in the field of obligation, it wasn't in the field of, that. And so why don't you allow yourself to say yes to that so that it's a win-win for everyone? And I think that also goes in alignment with needs and desires, right? Is like, we're allowed to have needs and desires as well as everyone else's. And we have to kind of work around what those are, like the most important. What's the most important for me? And where are the parts that maybe are either not for the other partner or up for me to deal with, right? And so where can I say yes and no to that? And then invite that yes and no from other people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's going to be my homework. What are you available for? What are your yeses? Are you a yes to?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about I'm not available for that, right? And I was
It's a
also
great
having
place to
that,
start. Yeah.
right? But then this morning, what came up was, well, what am I available for? Right. And that was, I think, a new frequency that maybe was kind of newer for me to recognize that that is equally important. And I can actually start there. I don't have to be in the fear of like what I'm not available for and always trying to like, like because I do have a fear. I mean, I'm still working through the ability to say no. And that's still an edge for me. It's hard for me to do that. And so I think I can get caught up in where I really am like, oh my God, here it's coming. I'm gonna have to say no to something. And I like start to freak out and panic. And I think being able to also then really recognize where you can say yes minimizes that. It reduces that panic of like, what if we're not really worried about where we're saying no, but we're more worried about where we're able to say yes?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even just talking about it, my nervous system's all like, ooh, this feels
That feels nice.
nice. I can focus on some yeses. Cause, I also think when there's like a boundary breach or you are working on setting boundaries, that you do, it's hard to not go into like a little bit of fight around it, at least for me. That's like my tendency.
Same.
And so it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to, and it's like, oh, but I could, like, where could I receive? It's like, so we're not blocking that. So,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And isn't that truly what we're looking for in partnership and even in dating is that, we don't want it to be a fight all the time. We don't always want to have to be resisting these. So we do have to kind of look for, I think, those softer ways and more curious ways. I mean, this is why it's like, I'll just say it over and over and over again in this group and everywhere else is like where we can take that pause to process internally, not so much process with another person. I think we overdo that. I think it's important to self-process, self-reflect so that we can find that time of like, oh wait, what is it that I'm actually really what's really working in me right now? What's really coming up? Because I could easily make it a story about someone else. But if I really look at this, this is something deeper. This is actually part of my evolution. Wow, thank you. You know?
Action. Totally. Yeah. Well, I was sharing with you, I ended up taking a very long drive the other day
Yeah,
home from seeing
right?
friends. And it was in that last hour, extra hour and a half that I was like, I'm just going to turn off my radio and like just be. And it was in that moment that I had this like major like realization of what was really underneath what was
Hmm.
happening for me. And that, I mean, it always happens in the most random moments, like sweeping the floor, or I like to say dancing the answers, but you're right. I mean, then it's nice once you know that sometimes to get the reflection, but a lot of times also people love to coach and not a lot of them are actually coaches. You know what I mean? So there can be a lot of projection. Like I think we
Hmm.
can also get ourselves into trouble when we're taking advice from people.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
you
totally.
know what's best for you. I mean, that has been probably my hardest, like hardest thing as a relationship coach, sometimes working with couples where like this is not necessarily good, but to be able to be like, and that's their journey. They're gonna have to figure it out for themselves and not
Right.
accept that onto them because only only they know,
Yeah.
what's best for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And they know
Exactly.
what's best for them. They don't. They think they do, but they don't.
Right. I see it. Just let me know how it turns out.
That did just happen. I've been watching this woman for 3 years. What I thought would happen finally happened, but it was in her time. I think sometimes we forget like everything happens
Yeah.
at the right timing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that is where it is through our own timing. And I think our shadow work is where we receive our own nuggets. No one can actually do that for us, right? They can't be like, oh, here's the gold, here's the gift. Like, we have to go dive deep for that. Someone else can hold space for that, right? And really be like, I'm holding all the space till you can dive deep. And, if, and we can help reflect back what we're hearing. But anyway, we'll probably digress a bit here in that conversation, but
A whole other conversation for a whole other.
right. Mhm.
Awesome. Well, my takeaway is not just what are you saying no to, but what are you saying yes to?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I was really reminded through this practice course, it sounds almost trivial, but it's not. It relates to every aspect of life, and in particularly, like I think when we do this while we're single and dating, we create a better foundation for our relationship. But what I realized was what I was saying yes to, I didn't even know. And I was like, wait, I have all these things I actually want to say yes to this week that are my own yeses that I wasn't acknowledging. And I probably wouldn't have even acknowledged without this opportunity. So like this opportunity arose as such like a gift of reminding me of all the things I actually needed to do and wanted to do for myself that I might have actually blown off had I not had this like, hey, this what I felt like was potentially a boundary cross, or and I was like, oh, it just helped remind me of where I needed to find my center anyway, and what that yes was. And so anyway,
Well, that's what I'm hearing,
what'd you say?
choose yourself, which I feel like is what,
Chose myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
what we're
Yeah. But it gave me opportunity to do that. And so like that, I think we're often we get into that rub again. It's like it's actually almost always some super shiny, diamond underneath all this that we get to pick up as a result.
right. Totally. Well, and I think as it pertains to dating, like even just the people you're choosing to keep communicating with, is
Yeah.
it really a yes? Or is it a, like you're saying, a missed opportunity, like your client who wasn't even attracted to the lady picking him up at the car wash? Like, are you staying true to yourself too in the process?
For sure.
Yeah.
I feel like we could just keep talking about this forever.
No,
And
you shouldn't. No. Split it up.
we
Well,
might have to do a part two.
I think so. Yeah. Sounds good. Well, any final thoughts? nuggets of wisdom.
Hmm. I think we should leave it at that. I think that's good right there. Well, final thoughts is always letting us know what you think, what your experiences are. Where are you finding maybe some of those things that are coming up for you that are asking your attention so that for you to say no, so that you can actually find your yes to something maybe you didn't know that you even need to say yes to, or something you do know you need to say yes to. And share with us as always.
Love it. That's the mic drop. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Ciao.
Ciao.